Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna see.
Welcome back, all you citizens of the world. This is live from the Heartland for the week of April 11th, and this is our second segment. And our next guest is someone who I've known for a very long time. Seems like we've been around each other off and on for years. Our daughters used to play basketball together, or I don't know if it's against each other or together at Loyola Park, but it's the one and only Jane Ramsey. Good day to you, Jane.
Good morning, Mike. So good to be with you.
Well, let me ask you, how are you doing?
Well, as we were just sharing, I'm personally well, but I find myself outraged, as I'm sure everybody does every day, frightened, horrified by what's going on, the attacks on civil rights and communities. Keep trying to figure out with all of us together how we fight back. We're not standing back. We're not waiting for fascism. We just have to do what we do.
Well, I'm sure that you are aware, you probably were there, of the great march that we had this past Saturday.
Yeah.
And it happened all across the country. And I've come across some people who are questioning whether marches do anything. I know they certainly give all of us contact with each other and certain kinds of hope. What's your take on the demonstrations that are showing up pretty regularly now?
I think they're really important. I think they instigate us, they move people, they get people who have never been moved before to see that there's a path and they're not alone. And it sends a message to the country that we are not in agreement. We are horrified. It helps us send messages as what we see going on. So I feel strongly that it was really important, and that it was such a hoot to be marching around downtown. I ran into Katie. So there can be, tens of thousands, and there were, and yet we see one another. And that's, it keeps us focused and positive.
It was really a very, pretty wonderful gathering. And one thing I just was thinking of, you didn't see a lot of police around.
No.
A lot of times when we're downtown marching and stuff, over the years, there have been plenty of Chicago police people there. There were hardly anybody.
Very few. And it was really such a disciplined, first rally and then march for miles. It was, and to know, and I love too to know that there were small things happening in Rogers Park, in Edgewater, in Evanston, in little towns all over the country.
Yeah, it was good. I got to say, I think the reporting in the mainstream media was pretty minimal. I had to go looking for an article in the New York Times on Sunday. So, I don't know how we're going to grab people's attention. If there's any violence, they give it plenty of attention. If it's peaceful, they kind of back off. Well, you've been an organizer for a long time. Both of us have experienced living in communities and working with people. You founded the Jewish Council on Urban Affairs that did an awful lot of work. I'd like you to share a little bit about that before we go on to some of the things you're doing now.
Sure. Thanks. Well, actually, Rabbi Robert Marks founded the Jewish Council on Urban Affairs, or JCUA, in 1964 out of the civil rights movement as an organization, secular, not religious, but organization to partner for the Jewish people in Chicago, to partner with oppressed communities in Chicago, particularly in the Black and Latinx and other communities, to address issues of racism and poverty and inequities. So it was founded then. I came to JCUA in 1979. So after this 15-year mark, Milt Cohn was the executive director when I came. You may remember Milt was who had
Milt Cohn, didn't he fight in Spain with the Abraham?
He did. He absolutely did. Yeah, with the Lincoln Brigade. So he was my first teacher. He was my first real teacher. Yeah, and what we learn organizing. I had a degree from the social work school at the U of C in policy and organizing, but you really learn it. We learned it from each other. Learn from what you did, Mike, and what you continue to do, including this, which is really an important piece of getting the messages out. So I came then and I became the director of the organization in 1982, and then I was there through 2012. And since then, I've been doing a variety of organizing and helping other groups and teaching.
Didn't you just get an award from the Voice of the People in Uptown?
I did. That was, so deeply great. Voice of the People is over 50-year-old affordable housing group. Yeah. So we at JCUA, we had worked with Voice over the years to support the affordable housing, but I just, what Voice does is so critical. Is housing 800 very low income people, predominantly Black families in Uptown where housing otherwise wouldn't exist. So I was very honored for them to recognize me. But for me, it was an instrument to try to inform my community to support what the important work they're doing. The other thing that gives me hope, Mike, is all the organizations that are doing work that Trump cannot take down. So part of our work is to make sure that we sustain the important work being done, such as Voice is doing.
How do we do that? How do we sustain this good work? I mean, what do you think of
every way possible? We give money.
Yeah.
So as we can give money, we give our time.
Wants money. I'm going to raise it at the end of the show.
Yeah. It's something that we can do. I mean, I talked to some family members who say they're just too tired. They can't do anything. They're older. I understand. I said, that's fine. Give money. Because with the groups that we're working with always need support, but especially now where we're seeing millions, multiple millions, hundreds of millions stripped from this work on purpose to stop it.
Right.
So that's one thing we do. And of course, we volunteer, we give time. We help network, we help groups network with one of those of us who have had relationships with a range of people. We can bring our people to the work and help people network.
Yeah, and the other thing I think we have to do a lot is talk about it to everyone. Yes. It just has to be on the agenda. That we bring it up and ask, what have you done or what can you do? Why not? That kind of thing. I mean, it's an art how you challenge your friends, your neighbors, and not so friendly people.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that I called you was because I saw probably Facebook and Instagram and email. I'm not sure where all this stuff comes from anymore, but you were really concerned about Social Security.
Yeah,
younger people who are listening to the show may not get it, but when you get older, and if you don't have a big pension, Social Security, which you've paid into for most of your life, is really a lifeline. And,
it is your lifeline. In fact, lifeline is the word that was just in my head before you said it. And particularly the people who are having the biggest problems right now with Social Security and the massive destructive cuts that Doge and Musk, empowered by Trump, are doing in cutting out. They're looking to cut out half of the workforce of Social Security. The people who are having the worst time are the people who are coming to apply to it for the first time. And, these are people, Musk and Doge are cutting out people's access to Social Security by calling in. So it means that people who are disabled or lived long distances from the offices have to travel with their walkers, with their disabilities, or just long distances to even apply. And with that, they are they're waiting and not able to get their application. So, and this is just the beginning of the slashes to Social Security. So we're hearing very serious reports are just the recklessness. And I think that's part of when I think of the Doge cuts, they're reckless. They're cruel. They're talking about fraud, but one of the offices that they cut at dissolved was the entire Office of Transformation, which was set up to promote agency-wide efficiencies and processing and tackle fraud. So it's just BS that they're going after fraud. They're not going after fraud. They are going after government and people's
well, they are, and I wonder what the ramifications are going to be on their own MAGA base. There's a lot of people in that grouping of people, and there's more of them than we would like to have. But I just don't know how long they're going to endure these kind of things from their great hero.
I was reading, and there was an article also in the New York Times about Social Security just in the last couple of days. And there's a quote from a woman for the MAGA base, Teresa Boswell, who said, "I didn't know he was going to pull this." She voted in Arizona to help flip Arizona for Trump. She found herself furious outside of the office last week, unable to sign up for her monthly benefits after she retired from her job processing legal papers. And her last quote is, "This is a joke."
Well, we're gonna see what happens. I don't know how. I have a lot of hope for the courts, but they sometimes we get a good decision, sometimes it's overruled, sometimes it's supported, sometimes it's put off a little bit. That seems to be the tendency of the Supreme Court. You got any hope for the Supreme Court these days?
Well, so let me start with hope. I've been surprised that Amy Coney Barrett hasn't been against us on every ruling. She's
right.
Hasn't been, so that gives us some glimmer.
I was wondering if she, I think she's a Catholic, and yes. I wonder if the Pope has gotten to her in any way, because he's been pretty good.
So she, so that's been very interesting and not what we expected. It doesn't mean that she's, doesn't go with the majority as well, but there was a very bad rule. I was really yesterday, the ruling is a Supreme Court with Roberts on the wrong side. So it was a 5-4 ruling, which allowed Trump to proceed with their deportations to El Salvador, and under this ridiculous archaic law, the Alien, we have to remember the exact name, but Alien Exclusioner Act, which he used wrongly. And so I was disturbed that the Supreme Court didn't comment on that. They didn't entirely rule against the plaintiffs. They said you went to the wrong court, so you have to go back to Texas instead of filing in D.C.
Two of them are in New York. Yeah. So two of them are in New York. So that could turn. So that was a very disturbing route. So I've been holding out hope for the Supreme Court, but sort of with bated breath because they're whim. I mean, so many of them, so thank God for the women on the court. Yeah, well, women are usually a little bit better than the men on a lot of issues. Well, you're teaching now at the University of Chicago School of Social Service. I think that's like teaching community organizing.
I do. I teach community organizing and coalition building.
I'd like to hear how you do that. I teach at DePaul. I do a class called Activists and Activism since '60, and basically it's pretty autobiographical. I mean, it's Join Community Union, Rising Up Angry, people I know, the Black Panther Party, the Young Lords, women's issues. What do you find your students, what do they like, and why do they take that class? How many kids going to the University of Chicago want to be a community organizer, unless it's like Obama, as a stepping stone to the presidency?
No, these kids, I am so moved by them. They really are keeping me going. And I get in my classes, I teach it with, so the School of Social Services Administration, SSA, is now called Crown. We won't go to that, but that's the school's name, the social work school's name, and that's what my base of teaching. And students are coming there to have. Half of them are coming there to learn to be therapists, but the other half are coming there to learn to be, to deal with policy, to organize, to do all kinds of things. So I have a lot of my students coming from all over the country and all over the world to learn to be, in a number of them to be activists. I also get students who are undergrads from the college at the U of C, and I get students from the policy school, the law school, the business school occasionally. So they're I think particularly in this moment, the students want to be part of fighting back, and they're going into fields about dealing with housing and mental health and criminal justice and justice, issues, civil rights issues. They're choosing to, and at the same time, it's all being attacked. So they're fired up, and they want to learn how to organize. They want to learn from. Some of them have come in with organizing. Some of them were part of the protests on campus and with Gaza and in support with the Palestinian support. But most of them are new to this, and they want to learn. So we talk about some history of social movements, and then we get into tactics and strategies. And I bring in organizers, and Mike, I would love for you to come in, and people who are doing organizing now. Jesse Hoyt is coming to my class tomorrow, and talking about how people are organizing around immigration and schools and healthcare, and yeah. So that's what they want to hear.
I'm going to stay in touch with you. I'd like to learn some of those new tactics and things people are doing. Back in your days with the Jewish Council on Urban Affairs, you took a leave of absence and you went to work with our late, great mayor, Harold Washington. And I just want you to share a little bit about, first, what it was like working with Harold. Because everything we've known about Harold, he was a warm and wonderful guy.
He was a warm and wonderful guy. He was a guy full of love for people, all people. And if you remember, it was just an amazing time, more than we have time for it. But I think an important aspect of Harold being elected as mayor was that it came from a coalition of people, a coalition, Black, white, brown, Asian, LGBTQ, so many people came together, and that was Mikey, and you were part of this. That coalition didn't just form 2 minutes before Harold wanted to run. It formed over decades, over a couple of decades, in fighting back against the Chicago machine. So that was the context. So the coalition first came together and recruited Harold. He was happy being a congressman. They recruited him, begged him. He put up conditions that he didn't think the coalition would meet around money and numbers of people to register to vote. And the coalition went above that. And so he became our candidate, and then he became our mayor. And it was a visionary administration. So Harold was a very seasoned politician, understood, people did not want to cross him. So even people who were, even maybe machine oriented and weren't reform oriented, weren't looking as progressives, had to join this progressive administration. And working with Harold was really a joy. Working with the administration, because there was a vision of change. He wasn't always easy. He could be tough. There were some things that if he had an idea of something he wanted to have happen, and it didn't quite go right, you might sit across from him in his office and he'd look at you kind of crooked. And say, what's happening here? So, but he was a very loving man, and it was a very transformational time. I was felt honored. I was director of community relations for the office of the mayor. And
we were really fortunate to have him, and younger people probably don't get it. And I don't know if they'll have a mayor that's like that. But speaking of that, What's your take on Brandon Johnson these days? And do you think with his low ratings in the polls, he can run, for reelection, or are we looking for someone else? There's sometimes I've really liked Brandon, and we worked hard to get him elected, and there's some things that we are not too happy about. Your take on that?
Yeah, we did work hard. I think Brandon did not comes with a set of values, I think, that we as progressives share, that Harold brought into his administration, but he didn't come with the level of experience, the sort of the breadth and the depth or the context. And as I was talking, Harold was elected from a broad coalition. So I think Brandon was elected, had a strong turnout, but it wasn't that breadth of history and coalition. So I think that was a disadvantage he had coming in. I think another disadvantage he had coming in was just not knowing knowing what to expect and how to pull the levers of government. And I think he needed to be a little more humble than he's been in acknowledging he didn't know what he didn't know. So I think he has a tough road to hoe. I think he's lost the confidence of a sizable part of his base, and that brought him in. So I think it's a challenge. I think we need to look in the future for how do we push forward. How do we continue to push forward progressive politics in Chicago?
Jane, I got one last question, and I'm raising this. I believe you're Jewish, and I asked this of my earlier guest who was Jewish. We're engaged in a U.S.-Israeli war on Gaza. It's dividing the world in many ways. They just threw out the South African ambassador to the U.S. because of South Africa questioning the war. And they appointed someone whose kid got busted in the January 6th to be the new ambassador. But I think the ramifications for that at home are really dire for the Democrats, that you have a younger contingent of people who the Democrats need, who understand the issues. And we have older Democrats who are softer on Israel. And I have a lot of respect for Israel in a lot of ways, but certainly not for this current government. Your take on that real quick.
Oh my God, I'm horrified. So my take on it is that as a Jew, I have to stand with the Palestinians. I have to stand with the Palestinians because as they are being, as there is a genocide in progress, and as a Jew, and I am not alone. There are progressive Jews, including rabbis, people all over the country who are standing against Netanyahu, against what they're doing. We are pained by what happened, of course, in Israel to in the attacks and the loss of life, and that's also horrifying. But there we were talking. A terrible number, but what we're talking about in Gaza and with the Palestinians is unspeakable. Netanyahu is Trump in Israel, so we just have to oppose that, and we have to urge our electeds to oppose that, and we have to stand, particularly as a Jew who understands oppression. The other thing that's going on as a Jewish person, the abuse by Trump of anti-Semitism, which is a real thing, but it's not a real thing the way he's using it. And he's using the term anti-Semitism as a cudgel to go after other people. So he's actually exacerbating anti-Semitism. He's endangering me, my community, by his calculated abuse, and it's horrifying. And
Jane Ramsey,
yeah.
Thanks a lot for coming on, Jane.
Thank you, Mark.